to meet personally in the lecture room, so we are only online. But I would start the oral session that has the topic trees and agriculture. So we'll be speaking mainly about forestry and agroforestry. We have a couple of presentations today. We hope 5 presentation. Nearly all the presenters are here. So I hope you will enjoy it. We have a couple of people on WOA. We have also some people looking at us streaming on our YouTube channel. And today we'll be speaking about trees and agriculture. If I look at the topic, we have several topics of cocoa agroforestry, mainly from Bolivia. We have one topic from deforestation from Uganda and about wood production in Tanzania. So I hope we will enjoy this afternoon together. And first, I would ask, according to the order, Marco. Marco is here, and he will have the presentation about his research, which is called Evaluation of Local and International Cocoa Cultivars in Monoculture in Agroforestry System. So the floor is yours, Marco.
Thank you very much. Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to my presentation on the evaluation of local and international cocoa cultivars in monoculture and agroforestry systems. Our study was conducted in the Alto Beni region in Bolivia, where most of the Bolivian cacao is being produced. So cacao was first introduced in this region through governmental programs which distributed hybrid seeds to farmers. Then in the 70s, they introduced international clonal cultivars, which are still the recommended material for cocoa cultivation. In the late 80s and early 90s, El Ceibo, a Bolivian cacao farmer cooperative, launched a selection program to select the best performing cacao trees grown in farmer fields, so by farmers. So they selected more than 50 cacao cultivars locally, and nowadays they are reproducing 9 local cultivars and which are accessible for local farmers. So our main objective and question was if these local cultivars perform better than international cultivars, which are normally recommended. So we analyzed the yield performance of local and international cultivars and also of hybrid seeds, so of full sip families. Then we try to understand and identify the major factors which are determining, in our case, the yield. So flower intensity, incidence of fungal diseases, potential pot set, the harvest period, and the vegetative growth, so the production of biomass of the trees. Furthermore, we tested the different cultivars in monoculture and agroforestry systems, and we tried to find out which are the best performing ones, and also if there are some interesting interactions. So our study was conducted in the SISCOM Bolivia trial, which is a long-term trial where 5 different production systems are being compared. So namely 2 monocultures under conventional and organic management, 2 agroforestry systems under conventional and organic management, and 1 successional agroforestry system, which is highly complex and is also under organic management and doesn't receive any external inputs. So this long-term trial was established in the late 2008. All trees were planted then, and we have 4 replications. Also, each production system is replicated 4 times, and in each net plot, we have 48 cacao trees at the same density in all production systems. And we tested 12 different cacao cultivars, so 4 local, 4 international cultivars, and 4 full sip families, which are illustrated here. Here on top, red the local cultivars, the international cultivars, which are the most commonly used in and recommended in the American producing countries. And we crossed these the paternal these international cultivars with IMC 67, which is one of the most used paternal clones in breeding programs and for production of hybrid seeds. So we have these 4 full SIP families that we also tested in the 5 different production systems. And now my screen is frozen. Yeah. Sorry. So I'm waiting for my program to respond. But meanwhile, I can just continue with the data collection and yeah, just close the program. I have to open again. So we analyzed data. We analyzed data from 5 years that has been collected between 2015 and 2019, every 15 days on tree level. So we have data from each tree. We analyzed the cacao yield, which by using the number of healthy pods produced and the fresh bean weight. Then we converted the fresh bean weight into dry bean weight. The flowering intensity was estimated using a score from 0 to 4. So 0 means there were no flowers, and 4 there were a lot of flowers. And fruit set, which is the yield potential, was calculated by adding the healthy pods, the diseased pods, and the pods lost through Cherel wilt, which is a physiological disorder with the tree regulates the number of pods which are being produced and matured. And then we also tested if there is the correlation between the fruit set and the biomass produced of each tree and cultivar using the biomass from 1 year. So we did that only for 1 year using the diameter and an allometric formula. Finally, we also tested the incidence of fungal diseases of 3 major diseases by calculating the number of infected pods, dividing it with the number of total pods produced. So we found that the monocultures were the highest producing systems, followed by the agroforestry systems, and then for the successional agroforestry system was the least productive system. However, there were no significant differences between organic and conventional management. We also found that the local cultivars were the highest producing ones. So in red on the right figure here, and then we have here in green the international cultivars, and on the bottom right the full SIP families, which were very low producing. We did not find any interactions between variety and production system, meaning that the highest producing cultivars here on the top were also the highest producing in all production systems that we tested. So we wanted to find out and understand better what led to a higher production in the local cultivars. Why are they producing more? We looked into the flowering intensity, where we did not find that it is directly related to higher yields. So here on top in red again, the local cultivars which don't have a higher flowering intensity than 3 of the international clones. And also the full SIP families had not they produced quite a lot of flowers, but then when we look into the yield potential, the fruit set, we see that the hybrids, so the full SIP families, actually they have a very low yield potential. They produce very few pods in total. So I repeat, we calculated the fruit set by adding the diseased pods, the healthy pods, and the pods lost due to Cherel wilt together. And so we got like an estimate of the potential. And we see that this really reflects the higher yields produced by the local cultivars. Then when we look into the correlation which exists between fruit set and biomass, we tested it, and then we see that there is a negative correlation that is highly significant, meaning that the more biomass the tree produces, the lower was also the production of fruit set. So here on the left, we have the local cultivars again, which had a low biomass production. So there were smaller trees like illustrated in this picture, and we have higher, bigger, taller trees which produce a lot of biomass in the hybrids, in the full sip families. So we can say, we clearly see that grafted clones, like illustrated on these pictures, which were the local and international cultivars, they produce less biomass, and so they have more assimilates to produce pods. We also looked into the main harvest period. So when are most, more than 80% of the pods harvested, and we found that the local cultivars in red again are producing in a shorter period, and they start the production or the harvest almost 1 month earlier than the average of the international clones. This could be also a factor that helped escape some diseases. However, we could not test it or prove it, at least. But a shorter production with more or a more concentrated production, of course, is a favorable trait and is good for the farmer. So he has a higher return on labor. And finally, we looked into the incidence of fungal diseases, where we did not find any significant differences between production systems, and overall the incidence of diseases were very low. So we looked into witch's broom, black pot, and frosty pot rot, which are the major diseases affecting and limiting production in American producing countries. However, we found a lower incidence in the local cultivars, but this incidence was not, the ranking between the incidence was not consistent in all years, meaning that in 1 year, maybe 2A22 had a very low incidence. In the next year, it was very high. Overall, however, it was low. However, you cannot conclude that the incidence reflects also resistance. So concluding, we found that the selection program of El Ceibo was very successful in selecting promising cultivars with high yield and low disease incidence, but we did not find an interaction between production system and genotypes. This means that the best performing and just best performing in all production systems. And when we look into why the local cultivars were more efficient or producing more, it's because they were more efficient in allocating assimilates to reproduction instead of vegetative growth. And they seem also to have less sexual incompatibility. So they have less flowers, but they produce more pods. And in the end, yes, we saw that there is a lower incidence of diseases, and they produce more in a shorter period. Local cultivars should be, however, tested in different locations to see if they are really superior or if they just were better adapted to our local conditions. And the full SIP families, we cannot recommend them in our area, and this indicates that there's a high risk to planting hybrid seeds from non-tested material. So concluding, we can say that the breeding and selection for local environment can improve cacao cultivar production significantly, and that the breeding under shaded condition could potentially improve production agroforestry systems. Thank you, and I'm open for the question now.
Thank you very much, Marco, for a very interesting presentation. I hope also it was interested for the wider audience here. Yes, we still have a minute for probably few questions. So I will ask other presenters could also ask some question. If I look on the question and answers in WOWA, I don't see any question, but for those who are on streaming, for sure you can put your question in the session question and answers, and I can read them. But I will start the question. It's a quite interesting study, so it's quite clear that local cultivars has higher yield and they can manage the conditions much better with the high yield. But there were no differences between organic or conventional agricultural system. But what was interesting also for me, there were differences in between the systems. So full sun quite clearly produced more compared to the agroforestry system and succession agroforestry system.
Yes.
Was it because, well, just what first comes to my mind, was it because you measured the yield per tree, per hectare or per hectare? And was it because there were more trees if you have full sun system? Or was it that if they have enough sun, they produce more? Yeah.
So we collected data for each tree, and then we analyzed it also on tree. So the results are presented on tree level, and for all the production systems, we had the same planting density. So we could also convert it into hectares, but it wouldn't change the figure. The impact, of course, light is when it comes to in cocoa production, light is one of the most important and limiting factors. So, or yield determining factors. So it was definitely light, we can say, and that the fertilization. So since we did not see a big difference between convention and organic management, we can also say that the fertilization was probably did not have a big impact. So it was mainly because of light that they had a higher production in the monocultures.
I see probably more or less the same question from WOWA. What do you think were the main reasons for the lower productivity of agroforestry system? So probably you answer that could be probably light. However, well, most of the NGOs and other like promote among the farmers plant cocoa in agroforestry system. And if you clearly see from your results that planting full sun cocoa would be more productive, how would you convince the farmers to do that in agroforestry? What would be then the benefits that you would recommend for the farmers?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's so first of all, we have to also not to forget that in agroforestry systems, it's a more diverse system. You have also other crops. Of course, cacao is the major cash crop, so it's the most important crop, and you want to boost that one. And then, so this is one answer, that you have to see the full picture. And our study, it is a long-term trial. We have 5 years of data, which is already a good amount. But if you in future we'll see if the monocultures can keep their production that high, because there are studies that show that the production is higher, but it also decreases after 20 years in monoculture, so in full sun.
Okay, yeah, nice. Thank you very much for those answers. I don't see any more answers on WOWA. And yeah, we are running out of the time. So thank you very much, Marco, for a very nice presentation.
Thank you for having me.
If you have any more questions, you can, through WOWA and probably Marco can answer. And let's move to another presentation. We stay in cocoa and we stay in the same region. Actually, it's more or less from the same trials in Alto Beni. So Francisco is with us, and his presentation is titled Microenvironment and Leaf Traits Regulate Transpiration of Cocoa under Different Cultivation System. So Francisco, the floor is yours. I think you uploaded the presentation and you can start.
Thank you, Bohan. I think Keith have my presentation, a video, because my internet connection is not smooth. So here is. Good afternoon to everyone. In this opportunity, I will show you the result of our study about the ecophysiology of cocoa trees between two of the most cultivated systems in Bolivia and around the world.
We don't hear you.
Yeah, I cannot hear
It is
anything.
widely
Yes,
known
I think
that
you
the
have to
response
go
of
up
plant
the
species to environmental conditions may drive changes in functional leaf traits.
We don't hear
Some of these
anything.
traits, such
At
as
least me.
specific leaf area, are
Me too.
associated with
So
physiological
keys
processes
volume I think
such
is
as
too loud.
transpiration
It's
rate.
down, I think.
Thus, the interaction of all these factors may determine the biological fitness of
So
a
can we start from the
species,
beginning?
but also
Yeah, maybe we can
good
start
afternoon
again.
to everyone.
Please.
In this opportunity, I will show you the result of our study about the ecophysiology of cocoa trees between two of the most cultivated systems in Bolivia and around the world. It is widely known that the response of plant species to environmental conditions may drive changes in functional leaf traits. Some of these traits, such as specific leaf area, are associated with physiological processes such as transpiration rate. Thus, the interaction of all these factors may determine the biological fitness of a species, but also ecosystem processes such as water cycle. However, documenting these responses remain largely elusive in cultivation systems and in the context of climatic change. Thus, we were interested in analyzing how microenvironmental conditions and leaf traits have effects on the transpiration rate of cocoa trees compared between agroforestry and monoculture systems. On this context, we ask if cultivation systems drive changes in microenvironmental conditions and leaf traits, and if both microenvironmental conditions and leaf traits influence the transpiration rate of cocoa trees under different cultivation systems. To do this, fieldwork was carried out at the Saran Experimental Station in the tropical region of Alto Beni in Bolivia. Here, in 2008, a long-term trial of different cocoa cultivation systems was established in a completely randomized block design with 4 groups of each treatment. The trial was divided in 24 plots, which were assigned into 4 repetitions of 6 treatments each. The treatments were successional agroforestry, organic monocultures, conventional agroforestry, and conventional monocultures. On these plots, 12 local and introduced cocoa cultivars were planted. Of all these cultivation systems, we selected organic monocultures and organic agroforestry and 2 cocoa varieties to conduct our data collection, because most cacao farms in Bolivia use organic systems and cultivate these 2 varieties. Sampling was conducted in 4 plots for each type of cultivation system. In each plot, 4 trees were selected from each of the 2 studied cultivars. From each tree, 2 mature, healthy leaves without traces of herbivory were used to measure traits and transpiration rate. Environmental variables were measured on the same date in both cultivation systems to control the variability in cloudiness that can change from one day to another. For environmental variables, we estimate the canopy cover by measuring the percentage of light exposure around and above the canopy of a tree. Also, we quantify the ambient temperature and absolute air humidity with a weather anemometer sensor connected to a portable data logger. For morphological traits, The stomata density and stomata size were measured by printing the leaf cuticle in transparent nail polish and observed in an optical microscope equipped with a high-resolution camera. To estimate the specific leaf area, we took microphotos processed with the software ImagineJ to quantify the leaf area. Then, the same leaf was dehydrated and weighed. Thus, the specific leaf area was calculated from the quotient of these two values. Finally, to estimate the transpiration rate, we measure the absolute air humidity with an infrared gas sensor connected to the same portable data logger. This was carried out by isolating a sunlit leaf in a plastic container sealed with paraffin and recording the absolute humidity every second for 2 minutes. We divided the absolute air humidity by leaf area values and multiplied by 3,600 seconds to get the amount of water vapor generated per unit of area and time. As a result, we found differences between cultivation systems for environmental variables and leaf traits. For example, canopy cover was higher in agroforestry than monoculture systems, but both temperature and humidity were similar between cultivation systems. Among leaf traits, specific leaf area was higher in agroforestry than monocultures. By contrast, the stomata size and transpiration rate were both higher in monocultures than agroforestry. No differences we found for stomata density between cultivation systems. Additionally, we found that transpiration rate was influenced by environmental variables and leaf traits. We found that there is a positive relationship between temperature and transpiration rate in both cultivation systems. But in contrast, canopy cover and specific leaf area had a negative relationship with transpiration rate, but only in the agroforestry systems. We may conclude that canopy cover, temperature, and specific leaf area were the main variables responsible for changes in the transpiration rate between cultivation systems. Cocoa plants have reduced the transpiration rate in agroforestry systems due to shade conditions created by canopy cover, which also caused changes in the expression of morphological traits and physiological processes. Thus, cultivation systems such as agroforestry may contribute to reduce water loss and could be used as an adaptive strategy to the negative effects of higher temperature and less humidity in the context of climatic change. Thus, to the future, more studies about water use efficiency are needed to expand our understanding about the effect of climatic change on food production. To end, I would like to thank to our funding partners in Europe and Bolivia who make possible this study. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Francisco, for your interesting video, your presentation. Yeah, we are at the same location from the same experiment, just different approach, more ecophysiological. So I hope we can expect some questions from the audience or from the presenters. I don't see at this moment question and answer section, nothing. However, yeah, so for sure, my soaring question is that, yeah, it's quite clear and it's quite logical that humidity will change through the cover of the trees, of the shaded trees. It's quite interesting how also and probably it could be expected that the transpiration rate also will change through that, and it will be diminished by the shade of the trees. Could you furthermore probably connect it with, and again, probably with connection of the work of Marco, with the productivity? So does it mean that if the transpiration rate will be lower, of course we can save water and it can be very beneficial for climate change adaptation. However, will it have influence on the yield of the cocoa?
Yes, yes. I guess that's why we are trying to link these physiological responses of plants with the production of the yield of each variety, and also the yield at the level of the plots where cacao is produced. That's why we think that the increase of transpiration in monocultures may explain why in this kind of production systems there is more yield, because plants are using more water. With the water, I extracting more nutrients from the soil that then could be used to produce more fruits, and that's why they have a greater yield. I think that's the idea that we have, and that's could be a rational explanation, let's say, for a greater yield in this kind of cultivation systems. But as I told you, in the text or the context of climatic change, in the agroforestry systems, we have a better use of water. At least that's our results say, that if you have a group of plants or species cultivated under agroforestry system, you would use a better use of water, but maybe you will not get a higher yield in the production of fruits. Yeah, right. But also, like Marcus said before, there is another species that also are produced in this kind of systems. So this maybe compensate, let's say, the less production of cacao and use it other species to produce or increase your income for each of these
of course
production systems.
You also said that you compared two varieties. Where
Yes.
is it, and were there differences between those two varieties? So have you seen?
We didn't find any difference between the two varieties. At the beginning, we are expecting to have differences, but we don't have this. And the reason is because looking in more deep in the origin and also the relationship between these two varieties, they have the same origin. And we think that this is the explanation why we don't find any difference between two varieties.
And would you expect probably to have those differences if you had chosen different varieties, like as Marco said, the local one compared to the hybrid one, or to the imported varieties?
Yes, that's something we are trying to study now in a new project that we are working to compare these physiological responses between local varieties and introduced varieties to find differences between the behavior in terms of physiology of this, like you say, compared local and introduced varieties.
Okay. Thank you very much. If I look, I don't see any question of OA. So if there are no more questions even from other presenters, thank you very much, Francisco, for your answers. And we move on. And now we should go to Johannes, move to Tanzania. Johannes is not here, but I guess we have his video prepared. And the title of his presentation will be Improve Food Security via On-Farm Wood Production and Consumption, Evidence from Subsistence Farmers in Tanzania. So, can we go for that? We'll see the
Hello, my name is Johannes Hafner. I'm presenting today research from Tanzania, a presentation regarding agroforestry with the title Improved Food Security via On-Farm Wood Production and Consumption Evidence from Subsistence Farmers in Tanzania. My co-authors are from the Leibniz Center for Agricultural Landscape Research in Münchberg and from the World Agroforestry in Tanzania and Congo. So let's have a quick look at the agenda. It's very straightforward. We start with an introduction, objectives and research, questions, material and methods, results and discussion, and potential. So as an introduction, as many of you know, food security is a persistent challenge for many small-scale farmers in developing countries. As abundant research showed, firewood scarcity is a direct driver of food insecurity with regard to food quality and food quantity. Now, a closer look at Tanzania shows us that 90% of the population depends on firewood for cooking, and this is often done with three-stone fire stoves like open fires. We have an annual deforestation of around 400,000 hectares, which is not, of course, caused directly by domestic firewood consumption, but of course it impacts people who depend on firewood. So in Tanzania, as a conclusion or an hypothesis, a broad bottom-up transition to improved on-farm firewood production and consumption strategies is required to establish an energy security for small-scale farmers at household level. So what we did in this study, we focused on quantifying the firewood supply from an intercropping trial with Chlorisidia sepium, and we tried to quantify the firewood demand for cooking using traditional three-stone fire stoves and compared this with improved cook stoves. So we tried to answer three research questions. Number one, how does Chlorisidia sepium fuel wood production perform under different intercropping systems? Question number two, are there fuel saving potentials when using on-farm fuels and improved cook stoves? And third question, to what extent can on-farm produced firewood meet households' cooking energy demand? So the case study, as I said, is located in Tanzania, which is depicted in this picture. Highlighted in yellow the region, the semi-arid region Dodoma, where this study took place. And what I mentioned in the beginning, we have firewood scarcity to a large extent. People spend several hours to collect firewood, and the reality for most people is that they use three-stone fire stoves to meet their cooking energy demand. Now, coming to the material method section, how did we determine the fuel demand during cooking? So we set up a controlled cooking test and did a comparative study between three-stone fire stoves and improved cook stoves. These are the two pictures on the right. And we did these controlled cooking tests with three different types of fuel, namely the off-farm species Mimusops obtusifolia, the left picture, and two on-farm fuels, Chlorisidia sepium and pigeon pea. We tried to standardize the whole procedure as much as possible to reduce bias from different sites. So now coming to determining fuel supply, we analyzed the firewood production potential of Chlorisidia sepium under two intercropping scenarios. Here in the pictures you see this Chlorisidia sepium shrub, also intercropped with maize. So this shrub resprouts after cutting, so it is pruned once, twice or 3 times per year, and it will resprout. Therefore it's a very sustainable way of producing firewood on farm. So we have 2 treatments. We have Chloricidia sepium intercropped with maize, and in treatment 2 we have it intercropped with maize and pigeon pea. The trial we set up in 2014. So now coming to the results. What are now the performance indicators during cooking if we compare 3-stone fire stoves and improved cook stoves? So let's start with the total cooking time per meal. I didn't mention in the beginning we cooked the meal rice and vegetables. That means we cooked it with 2 pots. So when we look now at the left side, total cooking time per meal, we see that with 3-stone fire stoves and the off-farm species Mimusops, obtusifolia, 80 minutes were used to complete the cooking task, while the on-farm fuels Chloricidia sepium had a time saving of 24% and pigeon pea with of around 34%. If we look now at the improved cook stoves, the off-farm species took 66 minutes to complete the cooking task, and with Chloricidia sepium we could save 44%, and with pigeon pea 46% of fuel. Now looking on the right side, total fuel consumption per meal, which is actually might be the more interesting figure here. We found that with 3-stone fire stoves around 2,400 gram of fuel was used with the off-farm fuel species to complete the cooking task, and with Chloricidia sepium we could save 20%, respectively 31% with pigeon pea. With ICS we also had savings. The off-farm species again performed the worst, and Chloricidia sepium could save 24% and pigeon pea 12% of fuel. So this combined transition from the off-farm fuel to on-farm fuels and from 3-stone fires to improved cook stoves will realize time and fuel savings of more than 40%, which shows what a saving potential is included in those 2 changes. Now let's focus on the on-farm fuel production. I told you we had these 2 treatments, Chloricidia and maize, and maize, Chloricidia and pigeon pea, and we started monitoring the Chloricidia fuel production from 2014 when we planted, and we could really see significant increase in fuel production starting from year 2019 and also in 2020. We can see that treatment 1, maize and Chloricidia, performs better in terms of Chloricidia sepium fuel production compared to treatment 2, maybe due to the reduced competition, because treatment 2 contains also pigeon pea on top. What we did now, we converted the Chloricidia sepium fuel production to a comparable moisture content to compare it with the fuel moisture content of the fuel used during the controlled cooking test. And this horizontal line now here is depicted if we would use 3-stone fire stoves and the off-farm species. We could say it's a baseline scenario. We extrapolated based on our findings that a household would need 2,273 kg of fuel per year, and as indicated If we would make a switch to on-farm fuels and to improved cook stoves, I show here now the best case scenario, which is improved cook stoves and Clericidia sepium. We could reduce this household consumption potentially quite radical to 1.3 tons of fuel needed per year. So let's come now to the last slide, potential impacts. Potentially we have three effects: local, regional and global effects. As the study showed, there might be improved diets due to enhanced fuel availability, which will lead to a better quality and quantity of nutrition at household level. And there might be also reduced walking distances and time spent to collect firewood. At a regional level, we could say there might be a positive impact on forest degradation as well as on biodiversity and wildlife. Global effect, the major global effect might be reduced greenhouse gas emissions during cooking because on-farm fuel is used instead of off-farm fuel. However, to evaluate this complex agroforestry system, we have to be careful. We also have to include other things like the interaction with maize and pigeon pea, like what is the impact of those systems on the yield, on the crop yield, but also like monetary wise, what are the opportunity costs with regard to labor, upfront monetary costs to establish an agroforestry trial to get the trees, and what would be the annual management costs. So this research is still ongoing, and therefore we have to be very clear that we focus here only on the aspect of firewood production, which shows that there can be or there are positive effects. But on a system level, you have to be careful and first wait for the final results to make really a final judgment on the whole agroforestry system we use here with regard to fuel production. Yes, that's it now from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, and you're very welcome to ask questions and to provide further input. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Johannes, for his presentation. Unfortunately, he cannot be with us. And for sure, we would like to ask probably some few questions, but we are not able because he's not able to answer. But anyhow, if you still have some questions for his presentation, which was very nice and very interesting, combining two different approaches, I very much like it, and I really would like to ask a few questions. But you can put your question through the sessions of questions and answers on WOWA, and hopefully Johannes will be able to reply. But
good afternoon.
Let's go on. So we moved now to Uganda. So I would like to welcome Fatuma. She's here with us. And the topic of her presentation would be extent and rate of deforestation in West Bugwe Central Forest Reserve, Uganda. So the floor is yours, Fatuma. Please unmute your microphone. Yes, now you can speak.
Oh, thank you so much.
Hello. Okay.
Hello.
We hear you. We hear you quite well.
Can you hear me? What?
We do hear you quite well, so you can continue.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep. It's there.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fatuma Mutes from Makerere University. You're most welcome to my presentation. And the title of my presentation is The Extent and Rate of Deforestation and Forest Degradation in West Bugwe Central Forest Reserve between 1986 to 2016. Oh, okay. Okay. I had planned to do a live stream. Okay. All right. Sure. Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we do see.
Okay. Forests are important for human well-being. For example, they provide food to millions of people, firewood, timber, help in climate change mitigation, among other benefits. However, forests are declining as a result of conversion into different land covers, such as shrubland and grassland. Uganda has registered a lot of forest loss between 1986 to 2016. However, if Sustainable Development Goal 15 is to be achieved, there is need for up-to-date information on the status of forests. However, little has been done to determine the extent of land cover change, the rates of forest loss, and the drivers behind land cover change in Uganda at local scales. This study was conducted in West Bugo Central Forest Reserve to determine the extent of land cover change, the drivers of land cover change, and the rates of forest loss. This information is important when it comes to designing effective restoration strategies. The overall objective of the study was to contribute knowledge that will aid in the restoration of forest cover. The study was guided by two specific objectives. Objective number 1 was to quantify land cover change in West Bugo Central Forest Reserve from 1986 to 2016. Objective 2 was to examine the drivers of land cover change in West Bugo Central Forest Reserve. The study was conducted in West Bugo Central Forest Reserve, which is found in eastern Uganda. West Bugo Central Forest Reserve is one of the few surviving natural forest reserves in eastern Uganda. West Bugo Central Forest Reserve has 3 management zones, that is Stambog, there is Central Block, and Amonikaknei, covering a total land area of 3,772 hectares. Tobacco burning and agriculture are some of the major economic activities carried out by the people surrounding West Bugo Central Forest Reserve. In order to quantify land cover change in West Bugo Central Forest Reserve for the 30 years period, GIS and remote sensing techniques were employed. Accordingly, Landsat images for the years 1986, 1995, 2006, and 2016 were downloaded from United States Geological Survey. These images were pre-processed in ELDAS Image in 2014. Ground truthing was carried out, where a Gemini GPS was used to record the geographical coordinates of each of the land covers in West Bugo Central Forest Reserve. The coordinates collected were entered into ELDAS Image in 2014 and used as a basis for creating training samples in preparation for supervised classification. Supervised classification using maximum likelihood classifier in ELDAS Image in 2014 was used to classify the Landsat images of 1986, 1995, 2006, and 2016. Accuracy assessment was done using error matrix to determine the quality of the resulting maps. Change detection was carried out in Terrasat software 18.2 to determine the major changes in land cover. To examine the drivers of land cover change in West Bugo Central Forest Reserve, household survey, focus group discussions, and key informant interviews were used. Below are some of the photos which show the activities which took place while examining the drivers of land cover change in West Bugo Central Forest Reserve. On the left is a group of women who participated in one of the focus group discussions, while to the right the key informant interview being conducted. From the study, West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve has experienced a decline in forest cover. In 1986, forest was covering a bigger percentage of the reserve, about 43%. By 1995, forest cover was declining, and it was only 27.5%. In 2006, forest continued declining to 24%, and by 2016, forest had declined to 8.1%. What had been a forest had turned into shrubland. Forest covers experienced a persistent decline throughout the study period, and on average, forest cover has been declining at a rate of 1.2. However, as forest was declining, shrubland was increasing, with the exception of the second decade where it experienced a decline. However, on average, shrubland increased at a rate of 1.2. Poverty and local population increase are the major indirect drivers behind land cover change in West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve. While charcoal burning, firewood collection, timber extraction, and bushfire are the major direct drivers behind land cover change. Decline in forest cover could be attributed to the intensified human activities in the reserve, specifically overexploitation of forest resources for fuel, wood, and timber. This has been worsened by management constraints, specifically ill funding and understaffing. West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve has a small staff of about 4 people. And because the staff is small, surveillance is always little. And this has given room for over-exploitation. The people living around West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve are much aware of these challenges, and they use them to their benefit. So because little surveillance has always been done, this has left room for intensified anthropogenic pressure on the forest, hence a decline in forest cover. Fuel wood extraction is among the major drivers behind land cover change in West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve. And this is connected to the wide use of fuel wood in the country as energy sources. Over 90% of the people surrounding West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve use fuel wood for their energy sources. During the survey, it was common to see both charcoal and firewood for domestic use and for sale being piled around the forest. In addition, the reserve is near big urban centers like Mbale, Tororo, and Busia, where there is high demand for fuel wood. Further still, the area has good road network connecting the reserve to the major urban centers where there is high demand for fuel wood. So the good road network has also facilitated exploitative activities in West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve. Fuel wood extraction has been spurred by the high levels of poverty and local population increase. The population of the area has been increasing steadily at a rate of 2.7% per year. In addition, most of the people living around West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve have low levels of education and have high levels of poverty. Given the high levels of poverty in the area, people can hardly afford other energy sources like hydroelectric power. The only source of energy source they can afford is fuel wood. During the survey, it was common to see people of all ages, both men and women, moving around the forest looking for charcoal and wood. The pressure arising from the increase in population, combined with the high levels of poverty, have resulted into a lot intensified anthropogenic pressure on West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve, hence turning into a shrubland. Forest cover in West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve declined significantly by about 82%, and it has mainly transitioned into a shrubland. Human population increase, poverty, and associated demand for fuel wood are the major drivers behind land forest loss in West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve. Therefore, reforestation is needed to reverse forest loss, and there is need to encourage the use of alternative sources of fuel such that pressure on West Sibuga Central Forest Reserve is reduced. We are grateful to NORAD for funding the study, Red East Africa for enriching the idea, National Forest Authority for allowing us access to West Buga Central Forest Reserve, Uganda National Council for Science and Technology for giving us permission to conduct the research, Busia District Local Government, and the residents of Busia District for their warm welcome and willingness to provide the data required for the study. Thank you so much for your attention. Looking forward for your questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Fatuma, for interesting presentation about those drivers. So I hope there will be some questions. I still don't see any question on WOA, probably some from some other presenters. Well, for sure I will ask some questions. So based on your study, well, I really like this approach that you look at the satellite and you ask the people in the focus group discussion and in interviews. But you find the main driver of this change, and it seems that the forest reserve is like disappearing. There are very little forest left. And major driver is a poverty. Of course, it's generally said that the poverty drives the people. So the people are actually going to the reserve, if I understand it well, and take and cut the wood for firewood or charcoal production.
Yeah, they always go to the forest to look for livelihood needs. And since they are near the major urban centers where there is high demand for fuel wood, they always go to the forest, cut the trees down, burn and get charcoal, and sell so that they can get some income.
Okay, okay. This I do understand. Is there any like organization or state department or forest department that can prevent that?
Yes, there is a forest department.
Why they don't do that? If it's a reserve, it should be somehow conserved, and there should be some forces, or they should have some forces to prevent that.
Yes, they have some forces, but the staff is small, and sometimes they are not well facilitated. So they are not able to do their work properly.
Okay, so and the people are so they cannot make a farm on those lands. So they exploit just the forest, mainly deforested, but they don't use it for agricultural land because they change it to the shrubland, as I understood.
Yeah, there is no farmland there. It is only shrubland. It has only turned into shrubland, not farmland.
Okay, and you said that some recommendation would be reforestation or afforestation. Are there already any attempts to do that?
Yes, like this year I've seen some attempts. They are trying to do some reforestation in some parts. And I think it will be a good initiative. I saw some tree planting going on, but it has just started by they are planting some trees.
And is it successful or not, or somehow, because yeah, usually these attempts, they could be quite expensive. And someone has to bring the plants or seedlings and plant them and manage them and so on. So I would be wondering, well, what are these attempts successful?
As of now, I can say they are successful, but the trees are still young. They have just started the replanting. The trees are still young, but we hope it will be successful.
We hope so. Yeah.
Yes,
probably
we hope
would be
it will be
easier
successful.
Prevent deforestation and not to cure that something destroy it and then reforest it again. So probably the first thing would be probably good to prevent further deforestation, even though not much has left until today, as I understood from your presentation. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Yeah, there is one question from the audience, sorry. How can agroforestry help solve this problem? Yeah, that is interesting question with connection to previous presentation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think agroforestry is a good initiative because if people can have the trees on their land,
Exactly.
I think they can reduce, instead of coming to West Tibuco Central Forest Reserve and cut the trees, they can be cutting trees on their land. But the only challenge is some people have little land, and it may not be enough for them to plant all the trees they need.
And there is
So
another question: are there initiatives promoting agroforestry system, including timber firewood trees in the area? Are there farming systems present that would allow this? So it means probably around this area, around the protected area, are there initiatives of NGOs or state that those villages are, among them, some agroforestry system for production of timber or firewood or fuelwood is promoted currently?
yeah, there are some organizations doing that, and some people have come on board, but not everybody. There are organizations doing that among the farmers, and we hope for the best. If all the people around the reserve can join these NGOs, we hope it can be a good step towards saving West Tibuco Central Forest Reserve from a decline.
Yeah, we could see from the previous presentations from that video that growing probably firewood on the land in agricultural system could be very beneficial and could produce even better than cutting the tree somewhere else. Okay. There is no more question. We are a little bit running out of time, but still we have some time. So thank you very much, Fatuma, for your interesting presentation of your research. And we move further on and we go back to Bolivia. Luis is there. We don't see you, but we hear you, I guess. So now the last but not least, the presentation is with the title Herbaceous Species Cacao Production System, Biotic Homogenization and Dynamics over Time in a Long-Term Trial in Bolivia. So, Luis, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am Luis Marconi. I'm gonna speak about the herbaceous species that grows in cacao. No, this work is a cooperation between the FIBEL Institute and the Bolivian Institute of Ecology, the botanical branch, the herbarium, no, the Herbario Nacional de Bolivia. Well, I'm going to show you again the Alto Beni region is here. This is Bolivia. It's a region like 500 meters from sea level, and is the place where all the national cocoa production is made. No, it's like more than the 90%. No, and in this place is the experimental trial called Sarana, and you can see these plots. This is the plot that the different production systems that we have. And to explain it, I'm going to describe a little because it's important to my research. First, we have the organic that doesn't have any type of agrochemicals application. And the most notable feature is the presence of a legume cover called the locally Glycina, Neotonia wrighti. Then the conventionals that have glyphosate application and another agrochemicals. You can see that there are three types of agroforestry that uses timber, fruits, or mainly legume trees like Inga or Erythrina, Sabo, and Pacay, locally names. And then we have the succession agroforestry that have a high productive, high diverse of species productives, no, and the spontaneous species that grows and are managed to is some coated and and the system get biomass because in this system there is no external input. No, this is the systems. You have some pictures here to have an idea. No, the association agroforestry. This is the legume cover used in organic systems and view between agroforestry and monoculture. No, well, I'm going to focus onto herbaceous communities that are important because can compete with crops or interact with fauna, and in some ways can be products. No, the sampling. We took the data from two methodologies. No, first we have a systematic sampling that was like a snapshot on time because it was only 1 year. And I put this plastic frame 200 times in each plot and see which species appear in this plastic frame and have a idea of the abundance of each one of these species. And for other hand, we have a brown blanket inventories that over 7 years. This is the dates that the collections were did. And it was in an area of 266 square meters. And for the one who doesn't know, the brown blanket method is like a see which species appear here and put then or give each species a score. No. Well, in this presentation, I'm going to show the three questions for these answers. No. First, in a very descriptive way, I'm gonna compare the richness and the composition between the production systems. No. In the case of richness, we have this is the data, and if you see in the first study, we also take into account the woody regrowths, that can be seedlings or woody regrowth species that grows in the herbaceous stratum, and the herbaceous species, comparing between systems, we found that the successional agroforestry tend to have more woody regrowths, the white part of these bars, than the others, And in case of the strictly herbaceous species, we found that in successional agroforestry and conventional monoculture have more than the others. Now it's like there's no exist a link between the total number of species of the intensity and the intensity of management. If we see this pattern in time with the second data set, we see that there is no, the patterns varies over time, but exists a decrease in the number of species in two types of agroforestry systems, the organic and the conventional. This coincides with the disapparition of some Heliophytes species that appears at the beginning and then not. These species are like the two I show you, Mamordica charantia and Rhodbolica chinensis, that are Heliophytes and need light, and when in the agroforest tend to grow the shade and cannot exist. Well, in the case of composition, this is an organic, this is a non-metric scale ordination that you can see. Each point is a plot, and if you more closer are 2 points, more equal are in composition. You can see like a species of gradient. That goes from the intensive ones like conventional monocultures with application of agrochemicals and the successional agroforestry. It's like a gradient, and exist differences between systems in the composition of the species that grows. In time, now the size of the point is relative to the time. This is from the beginning, and we see that this pattern is so stable in time, because if we take only the last five sampling events, time only represents the 2% of variation of the composition, and describing what this difference mean, we see that in the linked to the successional agroforestry system, we have species like that are shade tolerant or grows in secondary forest also, and linked to the conventional systems, principally monocultures, conventional monocultures, we found species that for literature we know that can be tolerate or in some way the glyphosate. Leptoclavicata exists population in Mexico that resist the glyphosate application, and Amaranthus viridis have relatives of the same genus that tolerate glyphosate application. Well, the second question is to know like if exists like the hair communities between systems differ in the quality. When I say quality, is like is the conservation value, the distribution range. To take an idea, for example, this is Aristolochia pilosa. It's a species that grows in some areas near to the Andes and in Mesoamerica, and it's not an endangered species, but it's more important to conserve these species than grass, for example, that grows in all the world. And for measure the distribution range of each one of these species, I use the GPF data available of each one of the species and combine it with GIS techniques. I use this Diva software, and I count in how many ecoregions these species appear. Now, this is an idea. Now, and you can have a species that exist in 200 ecoregions, another than only in 4, and this axis represents of the each one of the species the distribution range. And surprisingly, exists a relation, interesting relation, no? Where the species that grows in the conventional plots tend to be worldwide distributed species, and species more with a narrower distribution grows into the succession agroforestry, no? Um, as a interesting example, we have a species like Pareana gracilis. It's a species that grows only in spaces in some areas in Latin America, and is the only species that we found that grows in crops, specifically in succession agroforestry and also in forest. And this result is important um, because this concept of biotic homogenization that says that in time biotas come to be more similar over time, no? And sometimes worldwide distributed species tend to be more important in localities, and natives tend to decrease in abundance, no? We think that the succession agroforestry can be important to, or uses this organic also to stop this biotic homogenization process, no? Um, well, then when we see these results, we think that it's possible that the exists difference in the migration between the systems we want to know how is the migration in the air communities and the trial layout. And for example, to first macro level of trial layout level, we want to know if there exists a point where the immigration could be more important than the management system. This is like a when the species that are in the plots is not the species that can tolerate the condition. It's like the species that can arrive there, no? And this only has sense at the beginning, where I use a spatial positions relation with the difference between systems. It's a composition analysis, the mantle test, and the first two sampling events autocorrelates, spatially autocorrelates significantly, and this means that the position of the plot is important to know which species are going to appear. But then no, and we see that the type of production is the main factor that determine composition of species, no? And this is the moment the difference establishes very well, no? In terms of species that arrive to the trial layout, we see that the most main of the species are present from the beginning, no? And other species tend to appear later, but they are not important in terms of evidence. And but it's interesting that some species that arrive later are only established in conventional monocultures in all the replics, no? Well, but but even exists an immigration process that occurs between plots or the plots and the near areas, no? And this is a species, Calicia repens, as one of the species that most grows in terms of the quantity of plots that exist, no? Um, you can see in this image is the structure, no, of the abundance of the species, taking account the moment of the species arrive, no? And for example, to understand in this plot, this species, this group of species can be more are present from the beginning, then entering this is that they enter in this moment, and you can see that species enters gradually, no? But it's a short distance immigration process, no? And there is no general difference between the importance of immigration between systems, except in a moment, no, that is in blue, and we see that in two organic systems there exists less immigrations, no species immigrations, and this is because have a cover legume, no, that doesn't the species cannot get into the systems, no. But thing that is important to note is that we saw that exists a strong difference in composition. It means that the immigrants are distinct, no, and it's. I think that is because immigration is like a meta communities, because species between the plots of the same production system or different types of sources. But for example, in succession agroforestry, we find a species that grows in barbechos, no, the secondary forest. But and the immigrants and in the conventional monocultures tend to be species that we found in roads or open areas, no. Yeah, this is the importance of migration. Like very fast conclusions, we saw that the richness tend to decrease in agroforest, except in successional, because have a lot of shade tolerant species, difference in composition stable on time, and more intensive is the system of productions, more wide geographical distributed going to be the species, and immigration is very important at the beginning, with and then exists like a short dispersion process, and systems interact with different pulse species or interact between with plots with the same type of production. No, that's all. Thank you very much. I use the same slide that Francisco and Marco, and that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Luis, for your presentation. Okay, it was interesting research. I will have a look if we have some questions on WOA. Oh, yeah. I can read one question. Luis, what exactly did you, with the GBIF and WWF ecoregion software, what can be seen? How can the results be interpreted? Sorry.
Yeah, well,
I don't know if I do understand the question well. What exactly you did with, sorry, on my screen, what exactly you did with
the GBIF.
GBIF and what I found ecoregion software? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, it was at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I use the GPF data to have a measure of the, like a proxy of the conservation value of each one of the species. No, I calculate the geographic distribution range of each one of the species. The GBF data is a online available data that you can see the data of the species. For example, if I want to know in how many ecoregions in the world exist this species, Aristolochia pilosa, I take the data of GBF and then combine it with the these ecoregions, and I can know how many ecoregions in the world is this species, and I do for all the species, and I found this trend, no, where worldwide species worldwide distributed species tend to be more present in conventional systems, and the most complex tend to have species with narrower distribution. That is it's a good thing to conservation, is to species conservation, no?
Mm-hmm. I think you answered the question. I do see the question. Add a question if there are some from the audience here, from other presenters. Well, I have one question. So you measured species richness. Did you look also at diversity? If probably some species was dominant, even though you found, because you finally didn't find differences in species richness. So more or less the species richness was more or less the same, comparing among the system. You found very different composition among the system, but the diversity, was the diversity or some diversity indices you used or not?
Yes, well, I use the diversity index, but there wasn't no a clear pattern. No, I decide only take composition and richness first, because richness is very used in another works to compare systems, and composition because it's the thing that wasn't most interesting. But yes, I do the analysis, but I don't found
Okay, I do understand. So we finally find out that the composition was very different in between various systems. So if I understood well, the composition in, for example, agroforestry and organic cocoa farming, well, the species were more the local or specialized species than very general species in monocultures and conventional farming system. Was it? Am I right to understand it like that?
Yes, you're right.
You know.
Yeah, you're right. And one of things that is interesting that the composition of the conventional ones are species that I'm think that is the glyphosate effect. No, it's like a filter a lot of species that cannot grow with glyphosate. No, and you see that can
Okay.
tolerate. Well, that is.
Thank you very much. We don't have any more questions, so we finished our presentation. Well, we still have a few minutes until the coffee break, but I would be glad if each of the presenter now could have, based on your presentation, based on seeing at the presentation, could you have just in a few words some final remarks or concluding remarks that what you have seen and based on your study? May I ask you one by one? So according to the order, Marco, well,
Yes.
sorry, but you are in the order the first.
No, it's great. So we saw in all presentations the value that agroforestry systems have, and of course, like now, if you look at cacao production as an example, yes, of course monocultures in full light, we have a higher productivity just when we look at cacao, but all the presentations showed the value of the agroforestry systems, which is really nice that we had like this composition of presentations in this session. And yeah, and also in my presentation, I showed like the value of different varieties, how a selection program can really improve productivity. And I think especially if we link like my conclusion or my findings with the one from San Francisco, we can clearly see that there is improvement for cacao breeding. At least cacao production can be improved if the selection and breeding is done in agroforestry systems.
Okay, thank you very much, Marco. Francisco, do you have a few words? We don't hear you. You have to unmute your microphone.
Okay, now I think, well, I was told you that in all this presentation, we saw, like Michael says, the importance of agroforestry systems. They're looking from the point of view of productions, yield of each of the treatments. Also in my study, looking in the ecophysiology of how agroforestry may make a better use of water, let's say this way. And also how these agroforestry systems can be used to solve some issues, some deforestation and use it to recover some spaces and degraded ecosystems. And I think there is an integration of production, also looking in the presentation of Lucho about the role of herbaceous community. And I think it's a complex relationship that is looking in these agroforestry systems. And we have go to deep in the study of these systems to look how these interactions between environment, between species, and between yield and benefits that people can get could be better understanding. I think it was a really, really fruitful of looking to all these presentations. And thank you to all the group.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Yeah, Fatuma, you have some concluding remarks? Can you unmute your microphone if you want? Yeah, now. Once again. as we can hear. Yeah, now.
Yeah, in my concluding remarks, I would say we need to find an alternative to, because the people around West Hugo Central Forest Reserve basically use fuel wood, and this is something hard to change. So as one person commented, if we could promote agroforestry, it would really be a good initiative. Then another comment is from another subsequent study. It shows West Hugo has these younger trees. Most of the trees are young, those are which are surviving, which is an implication that it has a good regeneration potential. What is needed as of now is to enhance protection of the reserve, so that the forest, because the forest has the ability to regenerate naturally, but it is only the pressure which is destroying it. So if protection can enhanced, I think we can reverse forest loss in West Hugo Central Forest Reserve. Once again, I'm honored to be at this conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Fatuma, for this work. Last but not least, again, Luis.
Yeah, yes.
Do you have any final remarks?
Yes, like Marco and Francisco says, I think that it's important to know that the agroforests are very useful in terms of conservation and other things. So, particularly I like the approach of Fatuma, because I like this link between the interviews and the GIS treatment that give me some ideas. No, and that's all. No, thank you very much. No.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Maybe make a little invitation to take a look the papers in the SysCom project, because exists works with birds and ants and other agronomic characteristics. No, that's
okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for all presenters. Well, from all the presentation, I hear the importance of trees. Yeah. So how farmers, they really need trees for their livelihood. And if they don't find them on their plots, for sure, they will find them somewhere else, and probably they will cut them and use them somehow. So from all the presentation for contribution, I heard the importance of trees mainly to be grown on their farms in agroforestry system. They could have lots of products. They could conserve biodiversity, but of course, they also influence the microclimate, they influence the growth of other species, they will influence the yield, probably in some cases negatively, as we have seen in Marcos in the yield, but they can compensate those lost yield in cocoa probably by other products. So I would really stress in all presentation the importance of trees for farmers, and the importance that those trees are grown in a farm and they are kept by farmers. So in general, thank you very much for your presentation. We had also about 30 followers on YouTube stream. So I think it was very successful. All the presentations were great. We had very interesting research. So once again, great applause for all of you, at least for me, and probably from the audience outside, anywhere in the world. And for those who will follow this session, this is the end of the oral presentation. But at 5 o'clock today, we will meet again, and we have the poster session for about an hour. And we had about 10 interesting posters. So be there at 5 o'clock and see you there. Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
See you too. Thank you very much.
See you.